Hi there, this is Crystal Morris Murphy, Senior Vice President at the National Park Foundation, Community Partnerships Division, excuse me. We're going to wait for a few minutes so that additional folks can sign on, and we'll be with you in a few moments. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the Fireside Chat with David Vela, Deb Yandala, and Will Shafroth. David Vela, representing the National Park Service as Assistant Director, and Deb Yandala, President and CEO of Cuyahoga Conservancy, and Will Shafroth, the President and CEO of the National Park Foundation. And we are glad that you're here this afternoon and can't wait to get the program started. So I'm going to turn it over to Will Shafroth for some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Crystal, and thank you and Madeline and your team for organizing this fireside chat, even though probably no one's anywhere close to a fire on this a very toasty day in our country. It's hot and humid here in Washington, D.C., and hope you guys are all feeling safe and healthy wherever you are. As Crystal said, I'm Will Shafroth, National Park Foundation CEO. I'm joined by David Vela, who has one of the title with one of the most syllables in it of anybody I know, the Deputy Director of Operations, exercising the authority of the Director of the National Park Service. I usually have to take one or two breaths when I'm saying that title, David. And Deb Yandala, who's our good friend and former president of the Friends of Lions Steering Committee and continues to be the president of the Cuyahoga Conservancy in Ohio. So when we were together last time on April 23rd, we came together to largely talk about how we're all navigating this unprecedented time with COVID-19. And I think it was a good conversation, had a lot of good insights and sharings from David McDonald at the time and David Vela. Today, we're 2.5 more months into this time, and we're going to certainly be covering that topic again. It feels like we have a better sense of what we're dealing with at this time. Many parks have since reopened, and I think we have some more learnings to share. That said, the economy is still very volatile, and the virus is showing itself in force around the country now, creating new challenges for all of us. It's also important to note, I think, that since our last call together, we've also witnessed very significant societal unrest triggered by the death of George Floyd. This has had a disproportionate effect on national park sites, as NPS and all of us have had to struggle with tough questions around addressing many generations of racial injustice in our country, as well as questions around monuments and memorials. I know that many of you on the call and your organizations have issued statements in support of the African American community, and we thank you for those. And many of us are putting in place policies intended to help reckon with our own understanding of racism and how we may all contribute to a more just society, including what our community of organizations can do. This is all big, unprecedented work that we're all being called to do right now. And I just want to acknowledge that it's a big time for all of us. All that said, I just, in the last week or so, I've learned about some bright spots, some good news, and I just wanted to share that with you so we kind of go into this conversation with a little bit of optimism. First of all, I learned just yesterday that our friends at Boston Harbor Now, who normally have two live fundraising events, are going to a virtual event, and they have already, this is going to be happening sometime around Labor Day, I believe. They've already raised $600,000 for their first online fundraiser, and we're a couple of months out. So congratulations to you guys at Boston Harbor Now. I think we're all learning that you have to stay in the marketplace in terms of fundraising in order to raise money. Our friends at the Rock Creek Conservancy is partnering with Pepco, which is our local electric utility company, on a new program to provide financial support to open space and environmental projects and resilience projects. So that's great. Pepco's done some great work in supporting local groups like the Rock Creek Conservancy, and they keep doing it. So good job, Rock Creek. And then finally, Children in Nature Network has just announced a Youth Outdoor Equity Leadership Fund in support of young leaders working to increase equitable access to the benefits of nature, environmental and climate justice, and community health and well-being. So that's good stuff, very timely work that those guys are doing at Children in Nature Network. So thank you for that. So I look forward to our discussion today. Despite what feels like an often chaotic time, there is much to be thankful for. It continues to feel to me like our work on behalf of the National Park Service and park visitors is as consequential and as important as ever. People want and need our parks, I think, more than ever, which is great, both great and challenging at the same time. So lots of stuff to discuss today. So before we start, a few housekeeping items. If you aren't presenting, please mute your audio so that we can mitigate disturbances and other background noises. People accused me last time of getting ice in my freezer during the little thing, which I will confess to. I actually did that, thinking I was muted when I wasn't. So for those of you who have an opportunity to speak, let's make sure we stay muted when we're not talking. Second, if you have questions along the way, please use the chat icon at the bottom of the presentation screen. Looks like a quote bubble. So click on the button and pose your question in the chat box. Crystal and Madeline are monitoring those and feeding us questions. And please indicate who the question is directed to, or to all of us. And obviously we can't guarantee that we'll get to all the questions, but we'll do our best. And thanks to you people who are submitting their questions in advance. And finally, we're going to be recording this conversation, and we'll send you a link to the participants, to everybody on the call once it's available. So with that, let's get started. David, I'm going to start with you, and I'm just going to start out with a quick comment for everybody. And you've heard me say this before, but it bears repeating, and that is that, David Vela has, I have very good information in that this gentleman is representing us all extremely well. He's working 7 days a week. He's probably putting in between a very light day would probably be 11 or 12 hours, and most days are probably 14 to 16. And it's just the number, the breadth, the depth, the complexity, the challenging nature of the work that he's doing is unprecedented in the history of our national parks. And David's the guy in charge. So David, thank you for all that you're doing for all of us and for our country, for the national parks. And if you wouldn't mind just, the mic is yours, and just share what you'd like to in terms of, how things are going, how the Park Service is holding up at this time, kind of what's on your mind, what keeps you up at night.
Well, thank you so much, Will. And can you hear me okay?
Fine.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, thank you again. And for folks that don't know me and the relationship that Will and I have had over many years has been something that I have greatly valued personally and professionally, as it really has helped us to move our partnership agenda forward, because we know each other, we respect each other and our respective teams, as well as you. And so let me begin by joining Will and thanking you and our NPS partners and staff for you taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. Because frankly, I want to hear what's on your mind, because that's how we can do a better job of addressing your issues, which are our issues. Will, I guess getting back to your question, what keeps me up at night, I'll give you 20,000 reasons. That's the number that of our workforce, and many more when you consider our partners and our volunteers around the country. My number one priority is to make sure that we all go home safely at the end of the day, including our park visitors. And sadly, that's not always the case with a recent fatality in Grand Canyon. And so we have to be sensitive to the needs of our workforce, our partners and volunteers and stakeholders during these very challenging times of COVID. So we spent a lot of time in the National Park Service talking about how do we go about achieving that. So that's what keeps me up at night. But also too, I just want to send out a shout out to our NPS staff for their resiliency, in facing COVID head on. These folks are on the front lines and dealing along with you with visitors and gateway communities and the general public. With a specific shout out to our public health and interpretive rangers who have helped to implement new social distancing protocols in parks, virtual park experiences, and a phasing reopening of parks to meet the needs of our public as they recreate and experience the great outdoors that this country has to offer. When you look at our natural and cultural resources team, as you know, we are entrusted in protecting our nation's most special places and all of the stories that they represent. We also have the artifacts and the monuments and the museum collections. And, we may agree or disagree with what these sites represent, but they're truly part of our collective history. And we will continue to preserve these sites in perpetuity and tell the stories that they contain as well. For our partners, I know that you've been impacted financially during this COVID environment. And as a result, I've directed my partnership staff to post resources to assist you on our NPS.gov website. And please, when you have a chance, refer to the partnership subject site, or feel free to contact Reggie Chappelle, who's my acting assistant director of partnerships and civic engagement. My friends, we will continue to discuss ways that the NPS can assist our partner community. So thank you, partners, and please continue to work with your superintendents and program staff.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Deb, why don't we go to you now? You've been, working in and around an urban park. You've had to manage the visit of the Secretary of the Interior in the last little while, and I'm sure that you've got a unique set of challenges and on all different fronts. Plus, you're both a cooperating association and a friends group. So, share with us some of your observations at this time, Deb, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Thank you, Will, and good afternoon, everyone. And David and Will, I want to start with a thank you to both of you. We in the Friends community so appreciate the way that you are walking with us, the support that you've given us, not just during these times, but ongoing. This is really a very wonderful and important partnership for us. I think I speak on behalf of this community when I say, yes, these have been challenging times. Our business models have been challenged. I think when I looked at the list of who had signed up here today, many of us have had to lay off or furlough staff. We've seen our work diminish, either because parks have been closed or the work that we do is unable to happen, I think, especially of our educational partners that are with us this afternoon. It's been really challenging. And yet I think many of us are starting to say, okay, if this is going to last longer than any of us had hoped, what are the new business models that we have to come up with? How do we rethink the work we do? How do we be even more park-centric, but think about our work in creative ways that will help us monetize the work we do as organizations and position our organizations to be stronger at the other end? Because I believe the federal budget's just going to be increasingly challenged, and our parks are going to need us more than ever. I think a number of us, especially in urban parks, have also been impacted by the murder of George Floyd. I think some of us have been already working on racial injustice issues. I know the Friends Alliance has addressed this, Public Lands Alliance has addressed this. But I think now more than ever, we in the nonprofit community are really called to be leaders and to really work in our communities and in our own organizations to address historic injustices that especially the environmental community and the parks community has been known for. This is a moment in time where I think issuing statements has been good, but we need to take action. We need to change our organizations and we need to change the work that we do. And then the last comment I'll make for right now is that this is fresh on my mind because we entertained our senator yesterday, Senator Portman, and he came to do a media release about the Great American Outdoors Act, and it was a wonderfully attended event by local media. This is a great opportunity ahead of us to drive dollars into the National Park Service, and I know that the Park Service will need us, and I think all of us are trying to think about ways, David, that we can work better with you as the National Park Service, and Will, with you as the National Park Foundation, to be able to assist in how to manage this great amount of money that could come to us to address important deferred maintenance. How can it be easier for us to fundraise, to get agreements done, to make maybe some changes in policies and procedures that would make it make us even more effective. We want to show back to Congress and the American public that we can use this money responsibly and get things done. And I think this is a great opportunity for all of us to work together.
Thank you, Deb. That was great as usual. Thank you for that summation of all the important things that are on our collective plates. David, let's just maybe focus for a second on that last point that Deb raised about Great American Outdoors Act. And for those of you on the phone who may not know, the Senate passed the bill, which would provide over 10 years, $18.5 billion to support both the Land and Water Conservation Fund as well as deferred maintenance across our public landscape, which includes the Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Park Service. The Park Service would get $6.5 billion of the roughly $9.5 billion dedicated to federal agencies. And it's a game changer, obviously, for the Park Service to have that amount of money over a relatively short period of time to address the deferred maintenance backlog. It's amidst all this other stuff that's going on that is very challenging, this is really good news. David, do you want to say a couple of words about how you guys are anticipating, should this pass the House and be signed by the President within the next month, how the Park Service is going to get going on this and how the Friends community can be supportive of you all? Absolutely,
and that was well said, Deb, because I agree with you. If there's anything I learned at Grand Teton, and from my dear friends from the Grand Teton National Park Foundation are on the call as superintendent, is just what the power of the Friends community and the philanthropic community can help to achieve by way of projects. And many of you through conferences have heard me sing their praises about how they helped us to rehab the visitor experience at Jenny Lake. And I can give you 19 million reasons why they were successful. And we were successful in changing and dealing with deferred maintenance, but changing inherently the visitor experience. So, Deb, I know firsthand from that experience what's in the realm of possibility with our Friends community. So to Will's point, one of the first things we're going to need to do, and these are truly exciting developments. You know, I heard folks in the department reference, especially the Assistant Secretary, if you're familiar with National Park Service history, that this is equivalent to Mission 66 and Director Connie Worth and building visitor centers and infrastructure for the National Park System back in the 60s. I think this is very comparable to what Director Worth did during those very important and critical times. So our first goal is to develop a list of sites where we would be able to implement the Great American Outdoors Act. And I can assure you that over the past couple of years, our team has been looking at what I'm about to share with you with great intensity. So again, the first is to develop a list of sites. The second is to make sure that our contracting offices have what they need to expand their operations and to help obligate funding timely. That's going to be critical to be able to demonstrate to the Congress and to the American taxpayer, not only are we grateful, but here's your return on your investment, and we're going to get it done timely. But to Deb's point, here's the third objective, is we are beginning conversations with some of you to determine what's in the realm of possibility, especially as we look at the construction process and construction products. And I really want to thank the Friends Alliance for keeping this as an agenda item at your meetings over the past few years, because not only have we been socializing, but you have too. So now it's time to put the two mindsets together and talk about what's in the realm of possibility. And in the weeks to come, we'll be talking about more definitively how we're going to go about doing that.
Thank you, David. And from the foundation's perspective, one thing that we might try to do to help facilitate this conversation is to work with members of the Friends Alliance community to identify maybe some specific ideas around policies, authorities, and processes that they have they're familiar with from their side, and to share those ideas with you and your team, so that we can keep this, like you said, keep this process moving in a timely and efficient way. Deb, anything that you want to respond to on that in terms of, are there anything in particular, are there specific steps that you think would be useful for us as a partner community to be taking to help David and his team prepare for this time?
Well, the immediate thing is we need to get this passed in the House. Senator Fortman yesterday was optimistic about that, but we all who can do advocacy work should be doing that right now. I think it would be great if this community continued to think about what are the things that could change to make this easier and help us all be successful together. What's the role of partners in terms of construction? How can we streamline agreements? David, what you said is music to my ears, and I think to our community. And please know we stand ready to work with you to try to help make sure that we are all successful together.
That's great. Thank you, David. Let's go to the very recent past and talk about as Deb said, the parks are reopening, the crowds are returning. We just had the 4th of July weekend. There were big events, obviously, in Mount Rushmore and DC, but throughout the country, people were just getting out for the long weekend to try to go back to places they love. Give us an update on how that's going and how parks are responding to the influx, and especially in a time when we're all being asked to recreate responsibly, maintain a distance and wear a mask and bring hand sanitizer, and all the limitations that exist around social distancing. So just love to hear your thoughts and observations about how things are going.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Will. I'll tell you, folks, and you heard me say this in a previous chat. In my 30 years in the Park Service, most of that working in the field as a superintendent, this has probably been, I know, the most challenging year in my 38 years of public service, but especially in my 30 years in the Park Service. When you factor in COVID, and we just wanted to understand what is this thing? How do we mitigate it? And clearly, with support from the department and CDC guidance and the White House, we were able to kind of wrap our arms around a strategy, which helped us to put together a risk assessment model that superintendents are using this very day. What I wanted to do is to make sure, with the support of the secretary, that we had local decision making, and that we were factoring in local and county public health authorities, state public health authorities, and clearly where the governors are. And so we developed this risk assessment model to put superintendents in a better place to be able to determine what their operational posture is going to be. We've re-engineered that risk assessment tool to now look at how do we make our parks more accessible. And it's going to vary, Will, state by state, park by park, and even parks within a given state, based on where the COVID positive numbers are, and again, all those other external interests. So basically right now we have 89 parks that remain closed, but the balance of our 419 are at some stage of reopening. And that's important. Even the the mall here in Washington, you can still walk on to the footprint. You can go into the chamber of the Jefferson and the Lincoln, but you just can't go into the Washington Monument, clearly because of the elevator and the lack of social distancing, and that remains closed in our nation's capital. But many footprints remain open, just facilities and restrooms, visitor centers had to be closed. So a lot of it's depending upon where the states are. But Will mentioned recreate responsibly. So hashtag recreate responsibly has been in place where we've seen the power of this community, this partnership community come together. And I especially want to thank REI for your leadership, and Will and the National Park Foundation for your participation. I also want to send out a shout out to our Harpers Ferry Center, who've created some new signage and designs that are being influenced by many of our partners on the call today. Let me give you an example. So some signage includes some creative ways of thinking of sharing that safety message about social distancing. For example, 6 feet, well, that equals 2 goats. And so we're trying to be creative in how we talk about being responsive to COVID in parks around the country. So our Harpers Ferry Center has created some amazing designs and signage to help superintendents to achieve that. I'll give you another example in the partner community. Was around National Trails Day in June. The American Hiking Society did not go forward with the intended event, which NPS parks and our rivers and trail sites played a large role. However, we were able to highlight some of our trails related to the African American experience, including Selma and Montgomery. And the department also put forward its new addition to the African American Civil Rights Network, the John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Park in Tulsa, Oklahoma. As some of you may know, Dr. Franklin was a foremost scholar on African American history. He also chaired the National Park System Advisory Board. So hopefully that gives you some examples of kind of where we are, how we're maximizing social media, and how we're doing our best based on where the states are to continue to make our parks more accessible, which clearly will have a positive impact on our cooperating association and in our friends community.
That's great. I think that this, you mentioned it, but the community of partners that are on the call today can be, I know, continue to be very helpful around getting out the message around recreate responsibly. I mean, I hearken back to the campaign around Leave No Trace and how important that was as a way to get people to think differently about how they behaved when they went into the backcountry or in our public lands. You know, pack out what you pack in, and know before you go, and some very basic things. Prepare for your trip, bring water, and now a mask and hand sanitizer, things like that we didn't have to think about. So, and this is not going to happen after people here at one time. So I think we all need to be mindful about the long game that we're in right now, and whether or not it's this pandemic, and when this is over, there may be something in the future we need to be preparing for. So we'll recirculate the materials, both that you described, David, as well as the other materials that we have to the community as a whole. And so we continue to remind everybody to share that. Deb, any thoughts that you want to share about this general conversation about how to continue to educate our public about sort of a different time that we're in?
Yes, actually I would. As being in a more urbanized park, we're seeing a lot of first-time visitors to our park. And I've been a little sensitive about some of the comments made by long-term visitors who consider themselves park people and who talk a lot about park etiquette in a way that leaves people out who may not be considers themselves parky people. And we've been trying to address it the opposite way in social media, and also recognizing some of the first time visitors are not folks that would follow us on social media. So how to really do the right kind of messaging in parks that doesn't have an expectation that you will automatically know how to use a park. We've been setting up welcome tables. We've been calling it that because of the first time visitors, giving out cold water on hot days because people may not know to bring a bottle of water with them when they come hike. So I think this is also a moment in time when we need to look at who our visitors are and be as welcoming as we can be. I think kind of to one of your earlier points, Will, for the first time, a lot of people are recognizing that being outside and in nature is physically healthy and mentally healthy. And we have great opportunity as the park community to be able to lift that up and take advantage of that. We also need to do our part on helping people feel like parks really truly belong to them and they are very welcome to be there.
Exactly. I think that's true. And as you indicate, representing an urban park could be different than kind of a small rural park, but some of the same principles apply. And the truth is, we can continue to work to learn from each other. The one point I wanted to make also, we're certainly in a very intense time that is unprecedented in our country's history, and I think maybe the protesting and around racial equality and in the Vietnam War in the 60s was very intense, obviously, but it certainly wasn't coupled with a pandemic, and it wasn't coupled with the most significant economic downturn since the Great Depression. And so we're dealing with so many different layers of this right now that it's hard to kind of sometimes see out of that. And I would say that the one thing that we're trying to do at the foundation is to recognize that we're going to come out of this, and we need to continue to strengthen our movement. And as a result of that, people like Deb and David and many others in the Friends community, remind us regularly that we need to be prepared for the long run. We hope to get back to the point where we can launch a collective campaign at some point down the road. So we're very committed to continue the good work around supporting the Friends Alliance Steering Committee to really create a more independent position for the work that they're doing, separate and apart from the National Park Foundation. And we're about to prepare to make a contribution to make that happen. Crystal and her team are working actively now to get out a new set of grants to help build capacity with organizations that have already been through our capacity building effort, the Strong Parks Farm Community, but also to support other innovative ideas that Friends groups have, both to address the current challenges as well as some future plans that they have for their parks. And so, and we're going to continue to do some work to holding modules around leadership, culture, brand, strategy, and resilience that we know these conversations need to happen. We're not going to be able to get together in person in the fall, but we want to continue to create community and build on the kinds of good work that this community has done over the years and in its fairly significant and efficient growth they've had over a number of years. So I just want to remind everybody that still goes on. It's still necessary. We're going to come out of this, and we hope, as Deb said earlier, to be as strong or stronger than we were when we went into it. David, I know you've been in many different roles in the Park Service as superintendent and regional director and assistant director, and I just from your perspective, what are the most important things that the people in the partner community can be doing for the Park Service in this time?
Well, I think exactly what we're doing right now, and that is having conversations, leveraging capacity, sharing best practices, as Deb has done in this call. I think that's what's going to be critical. Some of you have heard me talk about we are in a second century of service. We'll be 104 years old in August. But over the last 4 years, we have not had the opportunity to really think strategically, what does a second century of service look like? We're doing that now. And in the coming weeks, we're going to roll out our corporate strategy, if you will, on what does a second century look like. For example, there are going to be some key areas of emphasis. Modernizing our business practices is going to be critical. Upgrading our infrastructure, critical. But we're also going to be promoting advancing partnerships. And it's going to be centered around our goals around tourism, recreation, and the visitor experience. Also, effectively engaging gateway communities so that we can leverage our mutual interest. So what we need from the partner community is this ongoing commitment to dialogue, and as Deb said, taking dialogue into product, but making sure that that product is sustainable. Also, having those critical conversations about impacts to our operational status, and hopefully, as I made very clear to superintendents, you better be engaging your partner community as you look at your operational status. So a second century of service is going to continue to rely upon this community on this phone call. We cannot achieve the mission of the Park Service without Will and his team and the partnership community. And so everything that we're doing is incorporating the value that you bring to this organization, because we can't do our work without it.
That's great. Thank you. Deb, just love to get your observations, both about what I said and what David just said, in terms of from a Friends group perspective and from the Friends community perspective. What are your thoughts about, what are the most important things we ought to be doing right now, both in addressing today's challenges, but also thinking about the future?
Well, first, David, thank you for your words. That is so meaningful to our community to hear that from you. So thank you so much. I think partnerships are important. I think, I'm glad you embrace that. I think for us that are partners, we also need to be partnering with our communities, whether it's gateway communities, the tourism industry, local organizations, and we need to do a lot of listening in a time like this, listening to the needs of others and listening to how we can address challenges together. I feel very personally indebted to our national park staff in the park I work in. I have seen them truly be heroes over the last few months, especially with the crowds that we are seeing. And I think we in the partner community have to step it up even more in the way that we support our on-the-ground park staff. And I think our fundraising may be just a little different for the next couple of years. We need to be able to raise money to keep ourselves alive, but we also need to be doing projects and activities in our parks that really show the value of park philanthropy. I think we are at a moment in time where green spaces and public lands are being embraced more than ever, and as we work to embrace these lands with a racial justice and a social justice lens, I think we have an opportunity to have impact in this country, and we need to grasp it. And I am very enthused, and I think I know I speak for my colleagues on how we can advance this work together with the Park Foundation and our Park Service colleagues.
That's great, Deb. Thank you. David, we're getting some questions in, and the first one is directed at you, and it has to do with sort of collaboration of the kind that you're articulating today with the Friends groups and the regional offices. And the regional offices have these partnership groups within them. Any advice that you can share, or anything that you can share or offer in terms of how our partner organizations can be more effective in terms of coordinating and collaborating with those regional offices?
Really good question, and I don't think I've ever heard that before, but here's what we're going to do on that. I have a national leadership call at 4 o'clock today with all of my senior executives, all 28 plus of them, which include regional directors, associate directors, and deputy directors here in Washington. Will, I'm going to pose that question to him, because I'd be very interested in hearing their thoughts and perspectives, but I would welcome, and if you don't have my email address, I want you to send me some specific examples, because again, I haven't thought about it in those terms, about regional capacity in our regional offices, but my email address is david_Vela@nps.gov. And if you see Raymond, that's my first name. There are 2 David Velas. One works for the Park Service, one works for the Fish and Wildlife Service, so make sure it's Park Service. But I'd be very interested, because truthfully, I've never heard that before, but I will add that to my opening comments at 4 o'clock to our regional directors, and I will ask them for their input as well.
That's good, David. Just so you know, one of the things that we do at the foundation is we're thinking about what organizations around the country that we're hoping to be able to support, either in establishing a new friends group or building the capacity of another one, or looking at a merger, whatever. I'll usually call the regional directors, or Crystal will talk to somebody in their offices and really come to understand their perspective on kind of what they're hearing from their superintendents. It's too hard for us to be in touch with all the superintendents, obviously, but the regional offices really have a pretty good finger on the pulse of what's going on. And so I think I agree. It's not a question I've thought much about, but I think it's a really good place to think about how we can improve the collaboration and the coordination even more than we are.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Will. And there is an equivalent RGGI at the regional office level. There's a central partnership point of contact. We have 7 regions throughout the country, which involve the territories. And the organizational structure is, Will pointed out, regional director, then we have deputy regional directors, then we'll have associate regional directors, and within those associate, we'll have a partnership branch or partnership component. But if anything, it'll give you, just that area of focus within that given region. And Reggie provides the more corporate thinking and perspective, and you can at any time reach out to him as well.
Good. The next question is, I know this might be of interest to Deb as well. It has to do with the Land and Water Conservation Fund aspect of Great American Outdoors Act. I know most of our time and attention has been spent focused on the Restore Our Parks piece, which is the $6.5 billion over 5 years to address deferred maintenance backlog in the parks. But if this passes, there'll be $900 million a year for 10 years, and for permanent, to address land acquisition needs both at the federal and state and local levels. And so, David, our sense is that there will be a dramatic increase in the number of dollars that the Park Service will have available to it to address protection of in-holdings and edge holdings around the parks. And so I guess the question is, have you all begun to talk about a process where the Friends community can help you to, serve the role that they often do in terms of being an intermediary between private landowners and the Park Service to address some of the priorities of the national park system? Yeah,
no, that's well said, Will, and a shout out to you and to your staff, because as a superintendent in the field, I have been a benefactor of your involvement along with our own Friends organization. Again, I go back to Leslie and her amazing team and how we were able to leverage capacity using LWCF funds, and Leslie and her amazing donor community matching it to get the #1 land protection priority in the country, and that was the Antelope Flats parcel, state school land tract, for $45 million. And so I have seen once again, through the great work of the philanthropic community, specifically Leslie and her team, how we can leverage philanthropic support with LWCF funding to expand it, to sustain it, but Will, to your point, to get to those in-holdings, to make parks whole. I am equally excited about that. And yes, our lands office here in Washington and other parts of our directorates are very much engaged in working with regional directors and superintendents on what those properties look like. And again, every year, superintendents have to provide what's called their land protection priorities. So that's where we would probably start, and then look at other areas of interest. That's
great. Deb, I know you've had your sights on some land in and around Cuyahoga. Any perspective you want to add to this conversation?
Well, yes. Well, we're actually in the middle of an acquisition right now because we could move faster than the National Park Service could to protect this land that was threatened, is an inholding in our park. So I really am daily these days understanding the value of having money to get land and the opportunity for us to work with donors. Our donors love land, they love to protect land, and they love matches. So as far as I'm concerned, this is another equally big win for the National Park System and for us as the partner community to be able to get things done in our park.
That's great. We did have a question about when the money would start to flow on the Great American Outdoors Act, and my government relations team just sent me a text indicating that it's likely that the money would start to flow in March of 2022. That's our current estimate, and if that turns out to be different, we'll make sure we communicate that to the field. But we're going to have a little time to get organized on this and maybe begin to kind of prime the pump. David, that seems to me that could be an important role for the partner community to play too with you, is to kind of get the process moving in some cases with some projects where it makes sense, and so that when the money actually lands in your account, we can start spending it. We don't have to start everything at that point. Does that make sense to you?
It does. Absolutely. Well said.
Great. So another question that we had, David, everyone's very excited about the Great American Outdoors Act, but is there any status update on the 2021 Centennial Challenge projects?
I am not aware. I haven't heard of Will, but that's something that we can look into.
Good. Well, good. Maybe we can work with Reggie, and as a part of our follow-up to this call, we can send out a couple paragraph update so that people on the call know what's going on. I mean,
I'm sure Reggie is taking notes right now.
Good. Thank you, Reggie. Yeah. Well, listen, those are critical, and they're often we're talking about $6.5 billion. That's a little bit of a scale that all of us on the call are a little bit, it'll be broken down into smaller chunks, but still, the Centennial Challenge funds are critical in terms of matching the kinds of projects that most of us are involved in with the Park Service, and so we're very much invested in that. David, do you have any sense of the impact, because the Centennial Challenge funds are largely supported by revenues from the senior pass and maybe other passes, given the sort of the lapse that we had this year in the sale of those passes and overall revenues at the gate? Do you have a sense of how those programs and your funding in general might be affected by the coronavirus and the various implications of it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, actually, we're making those assessments right now as parks are starting to provide more accessibility and also starting to go through their fee collection processes. So we actually talked about that today, and we're monitoring, and hopefully soon we'll have a kind of general sense as to what it's looking like. Deb made a comment earlier about visitation to parks, and it is true. I mean, we are seeing large impacts, I should say, in visitation. I have a call with the superintendent from Grand Canyon right after this call to get an update on where he is at Grand Canyon. But no, we are seeing increased visitation in many of our parks, and so we're conducting those assessments right now.
That's great. Deb, I've got a question for you that's come in. I think that you expressed it in your opening statement, but I know the both the cooperating associations on their own and organizations like yours, which serve dual functions as friends groups and cooperating associations, have been hard hit on the retail side of your operation, and that's both bookstores, but also Golden Gate Conservancy. I know they do the Alcatraz tours and the Golden Gate Bridge efforts as well, and so many of you have been very, the bottom line has been very hard hit on this. So talk to us a bit about it. How can friends groups and cooperating associations, what can they do together when they're out together, and what lessons have we learned in terms of how we might be able to anticipate and soften the blow of something like this in the future?
Yeah, this is such an unprecedented time, and I think we're all kind of growing and changing through it almost daily. It seems hourly sometimes. One of the things, Will, I think for the National Park Foundation is any support you can give us that's just general operating, not tied to new programs, not tied to specific projects, but for at least the next couple of years to make some funds available that can be used just to keep our capacities going. We're seeing local foundations do that, and that's really helpful. Don't tie our hands too much. And at the same time, to work together on what are new ideas, what are new ways to market and to approach fundraising for national parks. We don't want to compete with the very real health needs that we're seeing in our communities. But at the same time, there's such a strong message around funding for the really the mental and physical health needs of our nation are somewhat right now tied to green space, because that's what people can do is get outdoors. Can we look at doing some fundraising opportunities and marketing opportunities together? I also think we're going to all have to look at some new business models, be able to do more online sales where we can't do in-park sales. And I think, again, share some best ideas and find ways to kind of, in some ways, reinvent ourselves for the time being. And I'll say the same for our education partners when our hearts are in getting kids into parks. And when we can't do that because of the disarray in the education world right now, what can we do? What ideas can we share? And how can we help monetize to a degree to keep our educational organizations alive to get through this? Because I do believe at the other end, people will want us and need us more than ever.
Yeah, let me just follow up on that. I mean, I was thinking about, is there any kind of, you mentioned flexibility in grants to not tie our hands too much, but is anything else in the same regard that we discussed, the rules around this investment of the Great American Outdoors Act funds, and being in a conversation with the Park Service of how we can work together to make these monies flow more efficiently and effectively and cost effectively, relative to some of those functions that are performed by friends groups and cooperating associations. Is this a moment to reevaluate some of those same kinds of rules and policies and authorities to anticipate, how we could do this in a better way now that we've kind of, really hit rock bottom in some places? How do we rebuild in a way that's going to make these organizations more effective in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a role for us in the Friends community to be at the table when it comes to construction and projects, to be project managers. We can hire project managers. We just completed a new visitor center, and we, the Conservancy, did the work on it. We were the project manager. We raised the money. We did the work. We worked with local construction companies, and under the direction of the Park Service, there's ways to work together. And frankly, when we're doing projects like that, we can monetize. That's helpful for our organizational model when we can be at the table. And it certainly means a lot to the community when we're using local people to do the work. So I think looking for some ways that we can be part of the entire process and not just be writing checks. I think that's, again, I think we've got some great opportunities ahead of us to be able to do that. But we do need to talk about policies and agreements and how to get some of that work done.
That's great. David, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, you've been in a lot of different parks where you've got these really important organizations, cooperating associations, managing the bookstores and providing the parks with educational resources and training and programs. This must have been hard for you to observe the collapse of some of those organizations for a period of time, not able to open their doors, not able to do the work that they've always done so well. Any observations you have about how we go forward in this time?
Yeah, no, thanks, Will. And for all the reasons that Deb talked about, there's so much capacity that the Friends community, cooperating associations provide to the visitor experience, because the Park Service can't do it alone. Our 103-year history, 4-year history has proven that we need our partners to serve and protect and provide for that visitor experience. But to Deb's point also is that there are opportunities for your community to help to do things more quickly, more efficiently by way of product. Under the leader's intent and the guidance provided by the National Park Service. I've seen it personally, and I've seen the outcomes and the impact to the visitor experience because we didn't, the government didn't do it, the partner community did under the guidelines provided. So whether it's product, whether it's services, I got to tell you, folks, hopefully there are a number of takeaways you can take from folks that have provided comments. But one of the takeaways I hope that you have is the sensitivity that we have on the impact on you. Deb said it well. You're local. You're in those gateway communities. You have 1 to 3 employees that rely, that will first of all take great pride in what they do, but then are directly impacted because that visitor facility is closed. So we get it, and superintendents get it. And so, I gave a couple examples of what we're trying to do corporately, to Deb's point earlier with the National Park Foundation of how we can, what does making everyone whole look like? How can we do it? When can we do it? Is going to be critical in our thinking. So I hope that you value that we have those sensitivities. We're having those conversations locally and at the corporate office level, and that we are mindful of the impacts that you are having and you are taking in light of this COVID environment.
That's great. Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Well, listen, we're down to our last 3 or 4 minutes, and I just want to offer each of you a chance to make a final closing statement for 30 to 60 seconds. Any final thoughts for you, Deb?
Well, thank you for this time, and I think these are hard times for all of us, and yet I sense a feeling of hope. We know that our work is important. We will, as a Friends Alliance, gather virtually this fall, and I hope folks can join us. I think as a network, this network is more important than ever. So I look forward to virtually seeing everybody this fall at our fall gathering, and there'll be more information coming out about that soon.
Thank you, Deb. David.
Thanks, Will. The only thing I'd say is that, it is in our history and heritage that the green and gray, the National Park Service, will address any challenge that it faces because this family is committed to doing it. You are part of this family. We need you. We value what you do and cannot adequately put into words what it means to have you by our side during the most critical time probably in our nation's history. So thank you for what you do, and be safe.
Wow, David, thank you. That sounds like unconditional love to me, and we appreciate that. And so, from the perspective of the National Park Foundation, we want to keep these kinds of conversations going. This is sort of the big conversation that we want to have every couple of months, but we're going to continue to provide opportunities for learnings and around specific topics. As I said earlier, the partnership team has nearly completed a set of 4 modules addressing leadership, culture, brand strategy, and resilience, and they should be completed later this month and will be free to access. But we want to keep up the conversation. We will definitely be following up on a lot of the kinds of things that we talked about today relative to Great American Outdoors Act. We'll send out another note about the timing of the votes in the House, and for anybody on this call who has the capacity to reach out to members of the House to indicate your support, I know that would be appreciated. David, we will promise to work with our friends in the Friends community to summarize some ideas for you all to consider, so we can begin a dialogue about how it can be even better partners to the National Park Service in terms of the implementation of the Great America's Outdoors Act. And I think we haven't really focused much on the Land Water Conservation Fund as a community, but I think that will be critically important going forward, given the likelihood of substantially more funds coming to the Park Service and more opportunities for us to look at to be your partners in critical land conservation projects. We'll also follow up with some additional information about Recreate Responsibly. I know we sent that out, but I think the materials, David, that you and your team have put together are both informative and fun, and that's a great way to make sure the message gets across. And then look forward to working with Reggie and others on your team around how we can better coordinate with the regional staff to make sure that we're maximizing our effectiveness there as well. So in closing, thank you all for joining this call. David, we had over 100 people joining us today. We'll send you a final tally of who participated, and feel free to reach out to anyone on our team for additional questions or comments. And thank you all. We'll see you again. Have a great summer.
Thank you, Will.
You bet. Bye-bye.